Everybody, Scott Walters, welcome to the channel. One of my good friends, Todd Sachs, Sachs Realty, another guy in the YouTube space, ringing the bell, sounding the alarm, and doing an amazing job. I know many of you have seen him before. If you haven't, welcome to the show. And Todd, thank you for coming.
Scott, man, it's always a pleasure. I love our conversations. Can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, well, you know, Todd, the real estate industry, as you well know, one of the things, everybody, that I really wanted to bring Todd onto the show because he's another active licensed realtor and broker, employs a lot of people. He's sticking his neck pretty far out by warning people like you might want to be careful right now. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Todd. I know there's a lot of other people, Todd, out there on YouTube that are trying to minimize the severity of what's going on because they're out there preaching one narrative to their buyers or sellers to their face, saying this time is different. And, you know, so they're really trying to hang on and grasping at straws on this one. Have you been seeing a lot of the same behavior? I know we were talking a little before the show on social media and on YouTube with agents still trying to kind of cling on to the idea somehow this time is different.
Yeah. And Scott, we discussed, I mean, it's almost, I hate to say it, but it's almost embarrassing. You know, we were at a trade show this past week and, you know, it was for the industry, it was for agents and a local board trade show. The agents go and they get their, you know, continuing education classes all done in one day. And, you know, vendors set up booths and they, you know, a lot of them are lenders, you know, and other professionals that serve the industry. But the lenders, I mean, it was almost laughable how they were approaching me and talking about, you know, and one in particular that they could do a mortgage at a 60% DTI, debt to income ratio. And I mean, it's just, it's amazing. And yes, and agents as well. I think the narrative has passed now where people want to hear now is a great time to buy. I think that Main Street media has finally caught on. We're the boots on the ground. You know, we see it firsthand. We're dealing with the affordability issues, serving buyers and sellers. We're seeing the concerns of the sellers, the properties now not selling and price reductions across the country. So I think it is time that the narrative really becomes, you know, where do we go from here? What's going to happen? Certainly there are people that can afford to buy in any market. I mean, there are, you know, people that are, you know, wealthy or financially independent, and they're affected very little sometimes by the overall economy. But Scott, you and I both know, man, that's not the norm.
Yeah, good point, Todd. Good point for sure. You know, one of the things that comes to mind as you're explaining that is, this is really hard for me, Todd, because I'm doing my best to really remain poised, but it becomes the percentage of the likelihood of a real estate crash, you know, and early on when the euphoria was taking place, the wealth effect, the trillions of dollars dumped into the economy through stimulus measures, stimulus programs, and straight up stimulus money. And then the migration, people migrating to different parts of the country because it was all crisis driven. If it's not for the crisis, we're not talking today. We doubled the amount of money in circulation and we overheated the biggest asset class in the world, the U.S. housing market. And for me, I just said, God, this is dangerous. I just had this moment of clarity. I said, this is very, very dangerous. So I was willing to really come ring the bell and sound the alarm and earn people's business later. Like, I'll put you on the sidelines, earn your business later. And I became kind of on YouTube one of the most honest realtors in the world because there's still people out there on social media. I see it every day. Our viewers are very smart. They watch this stuff every day too. It's crickets out there in our industry right now. We're in serious trouble for people that weren't ready. And so, you know, I think for me personally, it's always kind of like, you know, the first step of getting past a problem is admit there's a problem. And that was a really big problem, Todd, that we overheated this U.S. housing market. So what you just said really is critical, I think, for us, everybody watching today, is the people that halfway saw this coming will be less blindsided by it as it plays out. The realities are, friends, we identified the top of the biggest housing bubble ever produced in world history. So when you see overnight appreciation to never seen before highs start to trend the opposite direction. And that's what we're entering now. I think we can all agree on that. I don't care who you are, what channel you have, you cannot deny prices are declining, headed the opposite direction. So Todd, there's 3 levels of an economic downturn. You have a correction, which we're entering in now as prices are declining. If we can't stop it there, it's going to hit recessionary levels of a downturn, which now mainstream media is reporting 100% of all economists think we're headed for a recession. So that one's, in my book, almost guaranteed as we're at the front end of that. If we don't stop it there, Todd, we're hitting a full-blown economic depressionary level of a downturn like we haven't seen since the Great Depression, which in fact have cycled throughout time. So we can't rule that one out. So Todd, as we enter in to the correction phase of this real estate downturn, one of the biggest questions I get, and I want you to answer and weigh in, help the audience if you can on this one, is how do you sell your house in a declining market where people are dropping like flies? What are you telling your clients to do right now if they're trying to get sold in the flip-flop occurring right in front of us, Todd?
Yeah. And I guess, Scott, I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball, but we are dealing with it every single day, you know, working in the field. I think the big thing with sellers right now is they're saying, should I wait? You know, and I mean, again, we don't know, but we do know that the Fed probably isn't finished raising interest rates. November and December, we're probably going to see maybe even another 1.5 collectively. But you know, as the market is unfolding, one of the things that they're talking about in mainstream media right now is they're saying that single-handedly the housing industry is going to push us into a full-blown recession. So we are now talking about the housing industry turning us into, you know, recessionary times. This just feeds it the fuel on the fire, right? I mean, it's not just what you and I do. We have very small audiences. When you start seeing Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, or whatever start reporting on these, you know, housing issues, you have Jay Powell talking about the correction that's necessary in housing, and then also shelter inflation being extremely high and to remain high for quite some time. We've got affordability issues all over. But, you know, what we're telling the sellers is don't wait. Don't wait. Because if you wait, you know, and let's just say you have a house that's priced at $500,000, right? You know, at where you think maybe even less than what the peak, maybe that's 5% off of the peak. You know, if somebody comes in with an offer of $450 now, you know, where you may be saying, I don't want to take that. I mean, my gosh, who knows what it's going to be like in March or April as this thing continues to unfold. Scott, you and I have been in this before. I mean, that's one of, you know, where some of the history being boots on the ground, actually not just being YouTubers, but agents and, you know, people serving the industry directly, not just reading an article and doing a video on it, right? But when you and I watched what happened in 2008, that's what everybody wants to say 2008, right? It started in 2005. So it started price declines in 2005. It didn't bottom out to 2008, 2009, 2010, right? Before we started to see the recovery process. So it was many years. I think we're just at the tip of this, man. We are nowhere near. This is the head's not the tail. You know, I have a feeling we're in for a long road. Now, who knows? Maybe that's 6 months, maybe it's 9 months, maybe it's 18 months. But if you need to sell anytime soon, sooner than later, and to answer your question, you know, everything has to be presented right. Number one, you better price it right off the start. Now is not the time to say, let's try and push the envelope, right? You really need to look at the comps in the last month, month and a half, not 4 or 5 months ago. You need to take advice from a professional, right? And you need to be in as tip-top condition as you possibly can entering the market, because you're going to have one time, one launch, one chance to get it right. Now, with that being said, you know, if you need to sell, I'd be on it. I'd be on it.
Yeah, no, that's insanity. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around all this. There's so much to cover, but the reality is, you guys, you're right. And I think produced a video for the audience, and we talked about this. My top 3 things that you should be doing right now if you're going to market with your real estate. Number 1 is make sure you're in the hands of a high-level agent that's not in worse shape than you, that didn't drink the Kool-Aid and is underneath staggering amounts of debt and just needs your transaction to complete, so they can keep up with what they just got themselves. So number 1, have a high-level agent. Number 2, make sure your property shows its best. If you're competing with other show-ready FOMO factory model homes, it's so important. Before, in the FOMO, where there was stifled inventory, your house could show like a turd, and I could still get it sold. Those times have come and gone. Depersonalize the home, pull down pictures, get the stuff off the shelves, put it in the drawers. You got to show its best, like a model home. But number 3, the most important thing that you have to do right now, no matter how good your agent is, no matter how well the property shows, is price right. You need to get in front of this one. You cannot chase the market, because by the time we take photos, do open houses, get you showings, try to collect offers, your pricing has declined. So if I do a market analysis and determine right now, based on today's sales, your house is worth X, by the time it gets to market, it's worth Z. So if you come on the upper end, there's always the upper end of its value range, the mid value range, and the lower end of its value range. Depending, I always say, Todd, find out who your competition is and beat them. You got to come on in front of this. So price, if you don't show your best, your price better reflect it. If you don't have a good agent, your price better reflect it. But at this point, Todd, you're absolutely right, 100%. I mean, to get somebody off the fence and buy in a declining market in a recession, do you think you could come on the market at the upper end of its value range? Of course not. This is basic common sense. Unfortunately, Todd, as a trained salesman, trained in the psychology of sales, the psychology of people fall in love with their houses. How many times, Todd, have you heard, my house is better than my neighbor's, it has this many upgrades, and their house just sold for X amount, I want to sell for this amount too, right? Right?
Every
Am I
time.
right?
Every time. Yeah. Oh, they don't have the same quality carpet that we put. I mean, they know, you don't understand. We used, custom paint on the wall. I mean, it's kind of exaggerative right now, but, yes, everyone thinks that their house, they can tell you 1,000 reasons. People do not have the emotional attachment to your home that you have to your home. And, and to your point, Scott, what happens when the market is going up, okay, what people try and do, and this is what happened, is they try and race up a little bit in price to where it currently is, because the market's going up and they want to try and make their offer appealing, and hope that you take it before it goes even further beyond the price, because it's on an upward trend. Well, the same happens, and this is where it's really important. Where do you buy? How do you tell a buyer to pull the trigger on a sale or offer that is declining every single day? The market is getting worse every single day. So they're like, well, why should I buy it today at $400,000 when tomorrow it's going to be worth $390? I'll wait till tomorrow, or I'll wait till next week, or they'll just try and jump to the chase, try and predict the market and offer you a low price, hoping that it doesn't go below that, but that they feel like, hey, I still got a deal. They wanted $400,000. We got it at $360. I feel that we made out. But that's what the sellers have to understand. And what you're saying is they got to get in front of that. So if the market is at $400,000, if you want to sell, go ahead and get the $360. If there's interest at $360, maybe you'll get a couple offers that'll move you up to $375. But don't try and chase the downward trend, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose.
Absolutely, Todd. And one of the things I've found myself saying on the channel many times, my audience will probably laugh at me when I say it, the kiss of death when selling real estate is showing price reductions stuck on the market. So if some agent comes over to see the house and tells you how great the house is and agrees with everything out of your mouth, how you're different, you're better, and you're right, knowing they just want to get your listing, so they're coming to you. Hey, we had our open house. We have three people walk through, 0 offers. We need a price reduction. We're seeing people, Todd, go do price reductions within the first week of being on the market. Oh, yeah. Because 100%. What you just said, because the market's declining. If you pull the comps today and come up with a market analysis of its value range, it's declining tomorrow. So the serious seller needs to get in front of it. It's getting dangerous out there, Todd, because a lot of people just don't have room anymore. And how about, Todd, the 10 million people? Let me repeat, 10 million people bought in the height of the biggest real estate bubble ever recorded in world history. Interest rates won't save them. I don't care if you had 0% interest. Your house is now upside down. You no longer own the house, Todd. The house owns you. You can't sell it for what you paid for it. So regardless of the interest rate, and as a recession kicks in and the job market suffers, this is playing out very similar to the last bubble. I've always said, or I've heard it said, and I'm going to say it again, history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it always rhymes. And we got some big old rhymes rhyming out there, Todd, don't we?
Well, you just led us right into it. I mean, what you just said described it, right? And, I can't tell you how many times, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, well, this market's different. This market's different. This market's different. We don't have the liar loans. We don't have the no doc loans. We don't have the, all the predatory lending practices that we had back then. I guess at some point you do blame something for the fact that it was an overinflated market, that it was a bubble back then, sort of like it has been. And so, the similarities that we see, Scott, from 2008, actually, we can see it again. And, depending on where we go with this and how, we might see it again. My recollection of 2008 is not what people say of the liar loans. Of course, we saw a financial institution collapse. We saw one of the biggest home originators, Countrywide Mortgage, collapse, Lehman Brothers. I mean, a lot of big, collapse back in that time. But what was the result? Because people stopped paying their mortgage. What I remember from 2008, at least the personal experiences that I have, where people stopped paying their mortgages because their house was worth $150,000 less than what they owed on it. And they were like, I'm not paying it. And we came out with programs that said, hey, that's okay. Hey, we'll put a short sale together. I mean, if you tell somebody, hey, your house is worth $150,000 less, your neighbor just bought next door to you is paying a fraction of what you're paying because you're paying because you can. I know people personally that said, you know what, I'm going to bank my money. I know one person in particular lived in their house for a decade, 10 years, and then got like $50,000 at the end of the day for cash for keys. 10 years later, after not making one tax payment, one mortgage payment, nothing, right? No insurance payments. Why? Because the lender paid it all. The lender paid insurance because they wanted to protect whatever asset they had left. They paid the taxes because the tax man would come and collect on the house and override that mortgage position, that first mortgage position, because it's the government's taxes. So they made sure that those bills were paid. The lender did, while this person stayed in the house and was able to bank money. They didn't fix anything. They didn't, that broke, unless it had to do with, life safety stuff. But my point is, the difference between now, Scott, and then is not what people are saying. What happened in 2008, people bought real estate that shouldn't have. The same thing that's happened leading up to our peak this year. We had people investing that shouldn't be investing. We had people buying second homes because there was so much cash in the economy that, they bought Airbnbs because, hey, we better buy real estate now because this fast moving train is going to be worth $150,000 more next year. So that's the same activity we saw when real estate was hot in the last bubble. Right. So I think there's a lot of similarities. We're in what I would consider very cautionary times. And, but I do have some good news. I had a conversation with a real estate attorney yesterday And he said, basically, well, now it'd take banks on average of 2 years to actually foreclose on a house, and you probably have another couple years that you can live in there before it's ever taken to court to where you're evicted. So the good news is that when we do start to see this poke its head to people that can't afford to pay their mortgage or haven't been able to afford to pay their mortgage, they're probably going to be able to live in the house for 4 or 5 years before they have to get out. I mean, I'm not the expert on it. This is from a real estate attorney.
Yeah, well, let me chime in on that one. And you're right. In the last financial crisis, the crash of 2008, people were able to remain in their home for a couple years before they finally got forced out. But listen, let me just tell you, friends, that you don't want that to be you, and I'll tell you why. Do you really want to go to sleep every night waiting for the knock on the door from the sheriff going to do a forceful eviction of you from the house, especially if you got kids in the schools? You need to get in front of this. So while the real estate attorney is absolutely correct, this has happened before. It'll happen again. A lot of people might dig their heels in and be like, well, I can stop making my payment. They're so backlogged with distressed properties that by the time they get to me, listen, you don't want that to be you. Right now is the most important time. If you think you're afraid of this thing playing out and you're going to be in trouble, you're one flat tire away, a hiccup from a tailspin, dragging a depreciated asset along for the ride until ultimately you got a foreclosure on your hands. Get in front of this and get to market and get out of it. Otherwise, you need to get as this plays out. And it will play out. It will play out. Is the biggest housing bubble ever recorded in history, might produce the biggest downturn ever recorded in history. Expect the unexpected. Don't rule it out. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying it could. And the percentage of likelihood continues to grow. Todd and I just scratched the surface today. We could go on and on. To throw the playbook out the window in this bubble. This is a flash crash just as fast as this bubble was created. It's reversed course. And everything now is starting to just fall on its face. Even the rental market is displaying declines in rent, something that the experts said would never happen. Well, it's happening. Everything we said wouldn't happen is happening. Expect the unexpected. Todd raised a great point. People that are financially fit might be able to weather this storm better, but there's a lot of people that went in with minimum amounts down. They're paycheck to paycheck. Inflation is squashing them. They bought at the height of a real estate bubble. They bought in those new FOMO factory developments where now the builders selling homes at a fraction of the cost where these people that bought were at. So they're competing with the builder liquidating homes. So their homes are declining in value. The writing's on the wall. It's all playing out. Todd and I are here to ring the bell and sound the alarm and raise awareness and let people know the waters that we're swimming in. I want to invite everybody to jump over to Saks Realty. There'll be a link in the description below of how you can find Todd. We're just scratching the surface. Todd and I were talking. I would love to start making this more of like a regular, almost like a weekly visit, because there's too much to cover on a short YouTube video. But the realities are, Todd, people are finding us because they need real talk, and mainstream media is not giving it to them. And if they are, they're giving them too late. This is time to be forward thinking. Get in front of this thing. Don't be a deer in the headlights as this thing plays out. Todd, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm coming on the show today. Is there any final words or thoughts or anything you'd like to say as we close this one up?
Yeah, I think, and Scott, look, I really appreciate it, man. It's great, always great, our conversations that we have together. And thank you for having me on your show. But I do want to say that, it's not just housing that, we're having as a affordability issue right now. It's, all of the necessities of life, right? I mean, the inflation that we've seen in utility bills and fuel and groceries, and the list just goes on and on. I think that this is now a time when we really need to start looking back to the basics of life, right? I think we need to get in front of this entire thing and, watch our spending, just be smart about it. And, and guys, I want to tell you, if you're watching and you're stressed out about buying a home, you feel like you've been sidelined once again and you don't know what to make of this, it's not a dirty word to rent. It's not. I mean, I would much rather see people, extend their leases for 6 months or another year, even if they're spending $300 or $400 more a month, than to make a financial mistake, a 30-year mortgage mistake, and get into a house, use all their money down, and then have trouble with, things breaking and things like that, and putting them in even worse of a financial position. But that's it, guys. I thank you so much, Scott.
No, thank you, Todd. And last but not least, in final thoughts, there's one time, Todd, where it makes more sense to rent than to own. And that's, in fact, only in a real estate downturn. If you guys appreciated the content, we want to humbly ask you to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Todd and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Social media links and all other information will be in the description of this video. If you need help buying or selling real estate here in America, I have the biggest network of top agents just like Todd in the nation ready to assist you. It'd be our honor and our privilege to do so. As always, thank you for your time. Please go make it count today. We'll see you on the next video.